Good evening, I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. The former director of the CIA testified today that the Russians brazenly interfered in the 2016 election and said an investigation into whether Trump associates colluded with the Russians was vital. John Brennan told the House Intelligence Committee the amount of contact between Russian agents and people linked to Trump raises questions.
I encountered and am aware of information and intelligence that revealed contacts and interactions between Russian officials and U.S. persons involved in the Trump campaign. By the time I left office on January 20th, I had unresolved questions in my mind as to whether or not the Russians had been successful in getting U.S. persons involved in the campaign or not to work on their behalf, again, either in a witting or unwitting fashion.
Did you see evidence of collusion, coordination, conspiracy between Donald Trump and Russian state actors?
I saw information and intelligence that was worthy of investigation by the Bureau to determine whether or not such cooperation or collusion was taking place.
Well, Brennan's testimony, and in fact, it's the testimony of a clear patriot, comes a day after another bombshell report in the Washington Post that the president asked two top intelligence officials this March to say there was nothing linking his campaign to the Russian meddling. And according to the Post, quote, Trump made separate appeals to the director of national intelligence, Daniel Coates, and to Admiral Michael Rogers, the director of the National Security Agency, urging them to publicly deny the existence of any evidence of collusion during the 2016 election. Well, testifying before the Senate Armed Services Committee again today, Daniel Coates refused to answer a question about that report. Watch and listen to how interesting he answers this.
I have always believed that given the nature of my position and the information that we share, it's not appropriate for me to comment publicly on any of that. So on this topic, as well as other topics, I don't feel it's appropriate to characterize discussions and conversations with the president.
Well, what's said there is what wasn't said. He didn't deny that the president asked him basically to say there was nothing there in this investigation. He's head of national intelligence. Anyway, the Washington Post story adds to a growing list of recent reports that paint a picture of a president trying to kill the investigation into his campaign's dealings. The president asked Coates and Rogers to push back publicly against Comey's case for an investigation. He asked Comey to publicly state Trump was not personally under investigation. He asked him for his loyalty. He asked him to kill the Flynn probe. And then he fired him, citing the Russian thing. A few days later, he told the Russians firing Comey relieved the pressure on him on the Russian thing. What does that all add up to? Well, the Washington Post Adam Entis co-wrote the story yesterday about the president's request to senior intelligence officials. U.S. Congressman Mike Quigley of Illinois is on the Intelligence Committee. Clint Watson, the former FBI special agent. I want to start with the congressman. Where do you think this is going? I mean, I'm looking at this pattern. I'll talk about it all, the whole show. A consistent pattern by the president to quash this investigation, to silence it, to debase it, everything, and then publicly, or rather, being caught saying how great he was, how great he felt, because he basically stopped Comey in his tracks. What more do we need for obstruction?
Yeah, I think what you see is a pattern where there's initially deception and a pattern that moves toward evidence of obstruction. Clearly, we have to understand what the intent was of the President of the United States, but when the leader of the free world asked the director of the FBI not to investigate, it seems pretty obvious what his intentions are. Where do we go? Look, we have to prove these things out. We have to get the tapes, we have to get the memorandums, and probably in closed sessions, listen to the people involved themselves.
Let me go to Adam on this reporting. It seems to me that we've got White House senior officials going to top intelligence officials saying to them, leave, Flynn alone.
Right. So, yeah, no, you basically have a case where you can tell the president, for whatever reason, we don't really understand his motivations there. Does he feel a sense of loyalty to Flynn? Is he worried what Flynn might say under FBI questioning?
That's my question. Is it he's worried about the guy ratting him out?
Yeah, we
under pressure, by the way, wouldn't he be worried about that, just to follow that line of reasoning? He'd be worried about the guy because the guy is facing all kinds of problems now with his failure to honestly answer government forms, failure to answer FBI questions, denying that he ever took money from the Russians when he was clearly sitting there over with Putin. Somebody paid for that plane trip over there in the hotel, and he said, oh, American business paid for that. That's not true. So he's caught. And if he's caught, he's got to rat out somebody or he goes to prison. That would look like a motive for Trump.
Right.
To be afraid of this guy.
Flynn is a military man, you know. Is he the kind of guy that's going to turn on, you know, Trump, who basically, you know, really incorporated him wholeheartedly into his campaign, and somebody that was there right from the start? I don't know the answer to that. Is it loyalty, or is he worried about?
Well, Trump's been holding his hand. Have you noticed?
Yeah,
what does that tell you? The fact that he keeps going back and tries to keep the guy warm and cuddly.
Oh, you make a good point.
Well, I'm not doing what you're doing. Let me go to Clint Watts on this. What do you see here in this pattern of the president? Yesterday, it's reported that he went to the two top intelligence people, the head of NSA and head of National Intelligence, asking both of them to say there's nothing there.
Who hasn't he pressured to try and get rid of this Russia investigation? He went direct to Comey. He sent his envoys over to both the FBI and throughout the intel community, telling him to investigate leaks over the Russia story. You've seen him now go to Rogers. And what we also saw today for the Brennan testimony is there were 3 levels to Russian meddling. We knew about the hacks, which Trump denies. The overt pushing for Trump from Putin was seen in the media. And now we see that Brennan last summer also knew of physical contacts between Trump campaign members and the Russian government. And so it's multi-tier. And the more you see Trump deny this and then try and squash it, the more you have to believe that there's got to be something there.
Well, this Erst politics, this constantly going to the east, to Russia. I mean, I have never come across any American who has so many contacts through his people with Russia. It seems to be, I went back into history. I don't know whether it's psychic or whatever it is. Why does Trump have so many people, Carter Page and Manafort and Roger Stone, and, of course, Flynn and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner? Everybody's sitting there talking and holding the hands of Russians. What do you make of it yourself, Clint? This constant pattern of what do you got to get out of the Russians? What are you worried they will do? What can they do for you? What have they done for you? You'd like to reciprocate? A lot of this stuff.
It's full spectrum Russian active measures. They're hitting on the financial front through Page and through business ties to the Trump team. They're hitting on the political front, sending ambassadors to meet with each of these people, having Flynn come over to Russia. You look at it in terms of influence part. They've got Stone appearing on RT, state-sponsored television, Kushner, who's also showing up or surfacing in these meetings. Every point of contact around President Trump has been touched by the Russians, and that is a classic way to do influence, which Brennan brought up today. Witting or unwittingly, these people were doing the Kremlin's work, and Putin got exactly what he was seeking.
You know, Congressman, I know people with patriotic feelings, like anybody like you, serving in Congress. I was so taken with what Brennan said today. There's a straight arrow guy, a public servant, talking about we have to do something to make sure nobody ever again helps the Russians meddle with our elections. This is a patriotic cause here. How did that strike you? I mean, I think that's the kind of thing that Democrats and Republicans agree on. We don't want anybody messing with our democracy. We sort of invented it, didn't we? And we don't want people taken away from us. Here he is, by the way. Let him talk. Here he is testifying today about the nature of this Russian effort to undermine our American democracy. Here he is.
It should be clear to everyone that Russia brazenly interfered in our 2016 presidential election process, and that they undertook these activities despite our strong protests and explicit warning that they not do so.
Well, Brennan testified he personally warned the head of Russia's intelligence service last year about his country's interference. He also told the committee Russia's goal was to get Donald Trump elected president.
What was Donald Trump going to do for them then? Or was it just that they didn't like Hillary?
No, I think they felt that Mr. Trump, being a bit of an outsider, and that they have in the past had some good relations with businessmen who happened to elevate into positions of government authority.
They hate liberals. Ask why Americans should care about Russia's actions. Let's watch this.
Our ability to choose our elected leaders as we see fit is, I believe, an inalienable right that we must protect with all of our resources and all of our authority and power. And the fact that the Russians tried to influence that